I'm here today with Jennifer Grant, one of the contributors to How to Heal Our Divides, An Abundance of Opportunities, which is the second in our How to Heal Our Divides series. Jen is the author of several books, including the picture book, Maybe God is Like That Too, which won a gold medal award from the Moonbeam Spirit Awards for Excellence in Children's Literature and was named a Book of the Year finalist in the Forward Indies Awards. Her second picture book, Maybe I Can Love My Neighbor Too, was named a Junior Library Guild official gold standard selection. Jen lives in Chicago, Illinois with her husband and family. Her latest book is too new to receive any awards yet, but it will. It's titled Sing, Wrestle, Spin, Prayers for Active Kids. I should also say that Jen and I have collaborated on many different projects, including various programs with Writing for Your Life and Compassionate Christianity, and you can learn more about Jen at jennifergrant.com. So Jen, thanks so much for joining us. It's always a wonderful thing to collaborate with you, and congratulations on all your amazing work.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So before we start talking about the How to Heal Our Divides book, please tell folks more about your background in general.
Well, I'm an author and editor, and I started my writing career doing, my published writing career doing newspaper columns and some other sort of magazine and journalistic work. And that sort of grew into writing memoir. And my first memoir, as I've told you before, has kind of grew out of a newspaper column that I wrote for a number of years in the Chicago area on adoption. And so my first book was a book about the adoption of my daughter, Mia, when she was a toddler. And so it was a book about transracial adoption and about the ethics of adoption and about our own story. And then my next book was about another parenting related book. And all of those, my first few books really tried to integrate my ideas about family and spirituality and kind of also sort of seeing, the divine in everyday experiences. And so I think that's another through line in some of my earlier work. And so I've written 6 books for adults now and several for kids as well. There's a few in the pipeline that'll be coming out next year with Beaming Books. And it's my great joy to be a writer and to be able to learn as I delve into these projects. I love learning something new. I love, with my book Dimming the Day that came out last fall, which is a book for adults, I learned so much about different topics in nature, and that was such a joy. Every time I sat down and just got to really dig deep and learn about, hummingbirds and how honey is made and all these things that were really kind of awe-inspiring for me. So yeah, I feel like I am a lifelong learner, and the way that I often learn is by writing about something.
Well, you've done such amazing work, flip-flopping back and forth between kids and adults. It's just been wonderful to watch your work evolve. And just so many great books. I mentioned a couple, but a lot of, just wonderful things that, some of your books too, I think have really got kind of like long legs. In other words, I think they'll be selling for years.
Oh, thank you.
We'll see. Anyway, so let's talk about How to Heal Our Divides. Your book is titled your chapter in the book is titled Open Books. Can you tell people about that organization?
Yeah, Open Books, and it was formerly called Gender Nation. It recently had a name change, but Open Books / Gender Nation is an organization that was founded in 2015 by 2 women, Morgan Walsh and Keiko Feldman. Keiko is a very dear friend of mine. We both attended the same college, and we've been very close friends for a long time. And the organization's purpose is to provide public school libraries, elementary school libraries right now, with books that are LGBTQ friendly. And so they are books that either actually talk about a character that is gay or queer or trans, or they just talk about kids who are different and don't conform in some other way. And so the idea is that a child who is non-conforming or non-binary, or really any child, and that's sort of one of the the points of this organization is that every child, regardless of their gender identity, sometimes feels like a misfit, sometimes feels like they don't fit in, wonders if they're different from everyone else, or if their way of being is wrong somehow. And so these books are very inclusive, very tender books that uh, the hope is that a child will find these books and feel seen, acknowledged, celebrated, and their peers, even if they are very sort of, they conform to more, traditional gender norms or whatever, that their peers will read these books and have a new empathy and a new understanding of their classmates. And so it's such a wonderful organization because it's providing public school libraries with books they need. And public school libraries are mandated to have books in them that represent and that reflect and acknowledge the student body that they have. And so, for instance, if a public school librarian has a large refugee population from a certain country, it's really part of their job to make sure that there are books that reflect that. And so obviously there are, LGBTQ kids in these schools, and their experience should also and needs also to be acknowledged, celebrated, and included. So these books do that.
We'll talk about that topic in a moment, but let me just make sure I'm clear on the nature of open books. They're not a publishing house, right?
Correct. It's a nonprofit that purchases and then donates curated sets of books. So every school that is a recipient receives the same set of books, and they're very carefully vetted. I've been working on this, helping with vetting the books for a few years. And so each book needs to be really high quality children's literature, beautiful illustrations, and appropriate for the age group. And so these books are given in sets to schools. And sometimes they have wonderful events where there's sort of training for librarians of trying to help them better serve their LGBTQ students. There have been talks about, how to use the correct pronouns for kids, how to welcome that, how to use your own pronouns so that kids feel welcome to use their correct pronouns, and so on. And so they've had wonderful collaborations too with different churches and community groups who have helped bag the books up. They're all put in these cute bags and donated. And so it's been a project that's really generated a lot of great community feeling, and librarians are so grateful because they see their young students struggling. They see kids that are, gay or trans, or just non-conforming in some way, like feeling bullied or feeling not included. And so to be able to bring them to a really wonderful, warm, loving book can be a lifesaver, honestly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So what motivated you to get involved with that organization?
Well, I was thrilled with it from the start when my friend Keiko started to work with it, just because, of course, as you know, I love story, I love picture books, I love children's literature, and I do so fully believe in the power of story to transform lives and to not only reflect our own experience, but to help us build empathy toward others. And so I loved that she was doing this. And so just kind of unofficially, I was helping her, and I was happy to give money when I could. And I was happy to review book lists. Publishers now are sending books to open books asking, could this possibly be part of the set? And, Keiko and Morgan are both people who work full time, and as we all do, and they haven't always had a lot of time to be able to spend the time to review these books. And because of my background in children's literature, it's not only something that I can do, but something I love doing. In fact, last week I spent a whole day. Keiko sent me a few boxes of books to consider for the next curated set of books. And I spent a whole day just sort of deeply, not only reading the books, but then reading about the author, reading about the reception of these books. And it was such a joy to me. So I got involved because my friend is a co-founder, but also because I so believe in the mission of this organization.
Well, I should mention too that, you did the same type of thing, the vetting process for Compassionate Christianity, when we
Hmm.
formed the children's books database
Yeah.
and list of recommendations that we have. So we should probably get an update from you of some books to add to those.
Yeah, yeah, I'd be happy to share what I've created. I've created another sort of similarly like a spreadsheet of books describing what the story is about, what age group it's appropriate for, and the sort of topic and theme. And I think that's really important. Like with the work we did for Compassionate Christianity, that I think, and forgive me if, or correct me if I'm wrong, but that was really an effort to help parents and also Christian educators and children's ministry people be able to use their resources well. I think your daughter Jennifer, when she did her study of kid ministry folks, found that so many progressive Christians would be, interested in different books to add to their church library or to their, curriculum, but they were worried like, well, what if this is something that gives a message about God that's really harmful or something that I don't want to promote? And so we were trying to say, by vetting these books, here's some excellent ones that are really well written, that are really beautifully illustrated with loving messages about the divine that won't hurt or burden the kids that are in your care. And similarly with open books, we're saying to librarians, here are some excellent, award-winning, many of the books that are on their list are ones that have won multiple awards from Kirkus and American Library Association and, many, many different organizations. So they're not, they're not chosen because, oh, well, these address a certain, population. They're chosen because they're fantastic books that all kids will love, and they reflect the experience of the LGBTQ kids in the school.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's chat about this more later.
Hmm.
um, but could you talk a little bit about your chapter that you wrote about the organization?
Hmm. Sure. Well, one of the phrases that I really wanted to include in that chapter is one that Morgan and Keiko, the co-founders of Open Books, use a lot. And they talk about how children's literature and books can be mirrors and windows to our experience. Mirrors in that they, books and stories can reflect our experience, and they can be windows where we can see someone else's experience by reading a certain story. And I start my chapter with a quote from Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, who is she's often called, and she's very famous in certain fields of children's literature, but she's referred to as the mother of multicultural children's literature.
Mm,
And she was at the Ohio State University, and she's done, the most kind of wide-ranging and important work on why children of color need to be represented in children's literature. And so she wrote this essay called Mirrors, Windows, and Sliding Glass Doors, all about the critical importance of diversity and representation in children's books. And similarly, Open Books is trying to put books in public school libraries that will be mirrors and windows and sliding glass doors for kids. And so I really wanted to start with referencing Dr. Bishop because she's really the person who did amazing scholarly work to show the critical importance. What happens to kids when they can see themselves in a story? And in her work, she looked at, what happens when Black children can see themselves in a story, and not a story that is about necessarily, one thing that sometimes happens is that, kids read stories, and like, for instance, in the LGBTQ community, one thing we're trying not to do with the books that we're providing to public schools is we're not trying to show just one way that kids are received. We don't want all the books to be about how a child is bullied for being nonconforming or, sort of negative messages. And similarly, Dr. Bishop wanted to see books about Black children that were just wonderful stories of childhood, like wonderful whimsical swinging on a swing set or, interacting with their friends. Not everything had to be a heavy story about racism, for instance. So similarly, the books that we're trying to curate and provide to public school libraries are books that are just wonderful, happy stories that can feature characters that are non-conforming and give them a place. And just like is the case, we hope, in their schools.
Excellent, excellent. That's just very cool. So let's get to some bad news, which is the whole area of book banning. This is just an issue that's getting worse, and I'm sure open books must bump into that in many different ways. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, specifically, Open Books has had tension with different school districts. They started their work in California. Now there are several states that are served by Open Books, and it's growing. It's continuing to grow and to be an organization that will serve schools nationwide. But in different school districts in California where they began their work, more conservative ones would refuse, and still some of them refuse to have the books donated to the schools. So, they take it to the superintendent of schools for different districts, and some districts have rejected the book list and said, this is an attempt to, make kids gay, or, just those kind of arguments, which make no sense. I saw a hilarious meme a couple weeks ago, which was somebody posted on Twitter something that said something like, if the children's books that we read make us different than who we are, why am I not a very hungry caterpillar? Which I thought was so great.
That is,
and, and that's a very good point. But yeah, so some school districts have just outright rejected receiving the books, but in others, there have been more conservative school board members who have tried to get the books removed from public school libraries. And as is so often the case with people who challenge or want to ban or censor books, it seems very clear to me when I read these stories of parents speaking out against the books that Open Books or other organizations, Human Rights Committee or other places are trying to help kids with. It seems like they have not read the books, and it seems very clear. And, there have been a lot of wonderful books over the course of our history that have been challenged or banned. I was surprised to find out pretty recently that Charlotte's Web was a banned book. And, the list of fantastic books that have been banned over the course of our history is long. But yeah, right now in our cultural climate, there is a lot more challenges to books and efforts to ban books. And I can't remember the exact statistic, but the American Library Association has published reports saying that we're in a kind of all-time high right now of people trying to challenge books. And not only books that address the LGBTQ experience, but also critical race theory, even books that just plain feature wonderful characters who are Black or people of color. So
really ridiculous.
Yeah, it's another symptom of the illness of our country right now, right?
Yep.
Is that all these wonderful books are being challenged. At the same time, and I know, I'm an optimist. There's a part of me that when I see all the uproar about truly just beautiful stories and books, or important books, like books that do talk about race in America, it shows me, though, the power of story. It just underscores the fact, like, it does matter what we're doing. It does matter that we provide stories and resources and books about different experiences. And although I'm completely against, banning any books and censorship and challenging these titles, it does, in a weird way, sort of encourage me, because it makes me think, yeah, stories are important. Stories are powerful, and people know that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, we're on the right side of the arc, the long-term arc, so I'm not worried about that. But in any event, what ways can people support Open Books?
Well, you can learn about them, and we'll include the website for the book in the chapter. But there's different things you can do. If you're not in a state that is currently served by Open Books, you can, give money to the organization. You can also get to know your public school librarians in your area and ask, You can look at the book list that's on the website and ask if any of those books are ones that you could donate to the library. In terms of the problem of book banning, I encourage people who are able to think about joining a school board in your area, because I think what we've learned over the last few years, and I'm sure some of your other authors in the How to Heal Our Divide series have mentioned this, but local politics and serving on local boards and institutions and organizations really does matter. And so attending a community meeting, attending a school board, voicing your own support of inclusive and welcoming books to your school librarians or to your school board members is something you can do. But when I talked to Morgan and Keiko, the co-founders of Gender Nation / Open Books, about ways that people can help who may not be connected with the organization. And something that Morgan talked about at length was the fact that we as individuals, we can do things as organizations, and we can do things, it matters how we vote, it matters how we spend our sort of political advocacy and our, that kind of currency. But another thing we can do is really look inside ourselves and see, in the way that that we can do this as white people. We can look at what is our privilege and what rooms are we welcome in that not everyone is welcome in. What things do we take for granted that we don't even think about in terms of language, culture, doors that are open to us? And similarly, what things do we assume, or what does our privilege, for me, for instance, as a straight, white woman, what are rooms that I can get in that other people aren't as welcome to? And so at the end of my chapter, I listed some really good books, most of which I've read or at least read through, that are books that help us examine our blind spots and help us examine how is my experience different than someone else's? And that can be kind of a springboard into taking action as well. So I think it is important to start from a kind of a grounded place of understanding who you are when you walk into a room and where are you welcome that someone may not be welcome. And then you can take steps to say, okay, how can I make this a more welcoming space for someone else?
Awesome. So what would you say would be like the number one thing you'd like for people to take away from your chapter?
Well, I think, unfortunately, I mean, there's so much sad news around how LGBTQ youth have such health disparities in contrast to their straight peers. And I actually this morning pulled up a few just quick recent facts from the CDC, and compared to their heterosexual peers, sexual minority students are more likely to be bullied, to seriously consider suicide. That is, 48% of LGBTQ students seriously have considered suicide. That number is, just staggering, right? And it's 13% of straight kids. So 13% of straight kids, almost 50% of LGBTQ kids. And that's really the underlying mission, really, of Open Books / Gender Nation is to reduce those numbers, to make school a safer place where they aren't bullied to the, in the way that they are now, so that kids are not feeling sad and hopeless and starting to use drugs to self-medicate because of the challenges they face. And I think the idea is, if we can give wonderful, welcoming books to young children while they're still making friends and getting to know each other, and they're in a wonderful, diverse school. And then instead of feeling like they have to bully someone that's different, or that they can use, hateful language to someone who's different from them or non-conforming in terms of their gender identity, they can understand that, this kid has gifts to give. This kid can be their friend, and so the hope is that efforts like Open Books' donations of books to public school libraries will be that these numbers will fall and fall and fall and fall and fall, and that those health disparities will, will not be what they are today. And so, and I believe so strongly in the power of story to be able to help in that. So
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for, raising this whole awareness around this area and for contributing to our book to help do that. I really appreciate it.
it's my pleasure. Thank you for doing this book and all the different topics that are covered. I mean, it's an effort to make a better world for the common good. And I love that so much. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Kind of looking forward back to, your own personal work. Anything you can talk about in terms of future projects?
Sure. Well, this month I'm actually working on my talk for our next Writing for Your Life.
Yay.
And I'm giving a talk about self-editing, and I'm having a lot of fun preparing that talk. And I'm doing a few speaking engagements this summer about dimming the day.
Good.
A few financial institutions, funnily, are having like in-person speakers again after years of not doing that. So that'll
Wow.
be interesting and fun to actually be in a room with people and talking to them rather than looking at myself on Zoom. I think I mentioned I've just finished doing some kind of book length editing for guideposts, which is, I love doing editing. It's exercises a different part of my brain. And in terms of creative work, I've got a few, as I mentioned, a few things coming out with Beaming Books next year. And I've been really spending more time working on fiction of my, like a novel that I've been working on. So that's been a joy as well. And again, I believe in the power of story.
Yes,
and
yes.
It's a privilege and a wonderful thing to be able to create as well as edit in this world. So,
well, Jen, thank you again for all your wonderful work and for contributing to our How to Heal Our Divides book. You can learn more about Jen at jennifergrant.com. And of course, you can learn more about How to Heal Our Divides at howtohealourdivides.com. So Jen, thanks again.
You bet. Thank you.